Question 1. In what way does your media product use, develop, or challenge forms and conventions of real media products? We created a short horror film with a hybrid of psychological crime titled Senseless. The general synopsis: she suffers from manic depression and takes pills to control her hormones in her body, which calms her bipolar disorder, although she doesn't realize her pills control more than just her bipolar disorder. It also controls this growing, controlling pseudo-identity that builds up tension and wants to avenge Mila's past bullied self. The film begins with a nightmare flashback of Mila stabbing Sophie Faldo, the bully. Mila wakes up suddenly, afraid of what she had dreamt, and takes pills to calm herself. This is not conventional of a horror film. However, in the short YouTube film Hallucination, the plot is based on a girl who is schizophrenic and feels that she is being stalked. The woman takes pills to calm her confused mind. Similarly, Mila remembers a flashback to when she was bullied by Sophie and Olivia, who pushed her against the school lockers, threatening her. And Mila takes pills to rid the confusion and anxiety from thinking about her past. This is conventional of a horror film. Typically, horror films use a non-chronological order, caesura, to reveal the plot. We use flashbacks to slowly reveal the context and to build the excitement. For example, Mila goes to bed and another flashback occurs of Olivia Carter restrained by chains and bleeding. This scene reveals to the audience that Mila changes between the bad and good identity. Mila then realizes what has happened and finds out her pseudo-identity carried out the work. At the end of the film, Mila appears to be smirking and looks directly at the camera with no trace of remorse. This is conventional of a psychological horror genre because in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, at the end of the film, the antagonist, Norman Bates, smiles at the camera and reveals both his identities. Similarly, Mila smiles at the camera, but this connotes that her evil pseudo-identity has taken control over her body. We wanted our audience to identify and categorize our film into the horror genre by identifying the horror codes and conventions. Our film is a hybrid of psychological crime genre. We applied the psychological horror codes and conventions. We made sure to conform, develop, and challenge conventions. Steve Neal mentions that genre is defined by how much it conforms and challenges conventions and stereotypes. We challenged as well as conformed to stereotypes. We introduced a new concept into our film using the pills as means of controlling Mila's body. We adhere to conventions through the background music. Like most horror films, eerie background music builds up tension. Also, we used silence to build an impact. For example, in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, the audience are aware a murder is going to take place or something terrifying was going to happen through the build-up of the music. The music typically sounds bizarre, like a cacophony of off-key orchestral music. In our film, the dramatic, loud background music is used at the end of the film because most of the tension is revealed at the middle and the end.
The severed body parts of the victims, which were scattered across Mile End Park. After arriving at the crime scene, a police source stated that the deceased were 19-year-olds Olivia Carter and Sophie Faldo. Olivia Carter and Sophie Faldo. The police are asking for help in identifying the suspect. Local authorities have found CCTV footage of the murder. Viewer discretion is advised.
Typically, in most films, the tension and revelation start to unravel in the middle. We, however, presented this at the end. This challenged Todorov's equilibrium theory. Todorov's theory suggests that all films typically begin with an equilibrium, and then there is a disruption which creates a disequilibrium. But eventually, everything gets resolved and ends with an equilibrium. Our film challenges the equilibrium theory as our film begins with an equilibrium and through flashbacks the disruption is introduced in the film. But nothing gets resolved. Moreover, we adhere to conventions using blood and gore. In our film, both bullies have blood smeared against their top. The first bully, Sophie Faldo, is killed with a knife. In our film, we show the knife directly pushed against the bully and blood spilling. Gore and blood is greatly prevalent in 2002 slasher film American Psycho. There is a scene in American Psycho where the antagonist uses a chainsaw to chase his victims. This promotes violence. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho inspired me, where he displayed an effective use of restrictive narrative. Restrictive narrative plays with the audience's mind and fools the audience into thinking they solved the dilemma. Restrictive narratives typically involve a turning point and a shocking twist. Although I wanted to follow through with using restricted narrative in our film, my group and I soon realized that this would be a challenge because our film is 5 minutes long. We did not have enough time to create a complex enigma. We needed our film to be simple and to the point. Later in our film, we decided that in the beginning, we wanted Mila to talk to her pseudo-identity. This idea meant that our film would no longer follow a restrictive narrative. We developed ideas on manic depression. We wanted Mila's world to be set in the real world, but the possibility of having manic depression and having dissociative identity disorder is not impossible and could occur in anyone. However, we wanted our audience to understand the difference between the real world and the world created by us, the directors. Dissociative identity disorder is a mental disorder. People who are diagnosed with DID have 2 or more distinct personality states. Individuals have trouble remembering events beyond the ordinary forgetfulness. DID is a severe mental health condition where an individual has multiple identities which share a body. We developed our idea of the DID because this concept is found in the 2016 film Split by M. Night Shyamalan. In the film, the person who has DID has 24 identities that control his body. Although, in our film, we challenged this concept because we included the narrative of antidepressants, which plays into Mila's control of her body, and forgetfulness. In our film, Mila takes her pills 2 to 3 times a day. The pills control the narrative, however the audience do not understand this until the end of the film. When Mila spills her pills onto the floor, it connotes her identity is released, and she has no power over her body, which suggests she is doomed. We also involve real symptoms associated with DID, such as forgetfulness. Mila is constantly confused by violent nightmares she has daily, but does not realize that these nightmares are actual events that took place. According to Psychology Today webpage, people who are affected by DID are victims of abuse. As directors and producers, my group and I needed to make sure we approach this sensitive topic appropriately as our film depicts a pseudo-identity as a villain and antagonist. We ensured our film included Mila getting bullied to also create a message that people who are a victim of abuse in their childhood are fragile and vulnerable and cannot control their emotions. Moreover, our film is set in an average London flat. Some horror films use scary locations, such as American TV show American Horror Story Season 2. It's set in a mental asylum. Audiences are always looking out for a jump scare because anything unexpected could happen in the asylum. However, many horror films do not use scary settings because it would be even more shocking and unexpected for the audience when something horrific happens. For example, in the 2017 film It, the story is located in a small sweet town called Derry, in Maine, where everyone knows each other. It is shocking to the audience when a monster terrorizes their children in town because the town is wholesome and small. Also, in 2010 film Insidious, the film is set in an average American family household. The storyline of a monster terrorizing a child is shocking to the audience. Our film follows the same idea because there is nothing scary about the house. We decided upon an average London flat location is because Mila is a young adult and she would typically live by herself. Also because the idea of a normal, sweet, timid girl that is capable of murder in a normal area of East London enhances the sinister reality of the horrific murders committed. At the end of our film, the psychiatrist asks Mila, "Who am I talking to?" Mila does not reply verbally and does not move, but her eyes move and looks directly at the camera. Very similarly, at the end of Psycho, the actual murderer, Norman Bates, looks directly into the camera and smiles psychotically and talks to himself in his dead mother's voice and responds in his own voice. Likewise, Mila talks to herself, but she imagines her pseudo-identity sitting across from her talking to her. The audience can see physically that she is talking to her own identity. This lets the audience know from the beginning that she has 2 distinct personalities. We also presented the binary opposition between the 2 identities so that the audience are able to discern the difference between good Mila and bad Mila. Challenged. As our film is a 5-minute long film, we did not want to create a complex narrative. We made sure our film successfully adheres to horror codes and conventions because we want to satisfy our audience and give them what they would typically encounter in a horror film. However, we challenge conventions such as the use of dialogue. In the beginning, before we added the scene with Mila talking to herself, we did not plan to include much dialogue, apart from the news report, which is the climax. Even with the newly added scene, our dialogue is still limited, and the audience have to solve riddles to find out what she really did and why she did it. The audience are only able to get answers through Barth's 5 codes: hermeneutic, proeretic, semantic, symbolic, and cultural. Hermeneutic, the Enigma code, is used in our film. This is seen through a small flashback when Mila is wiping the butter off her knife. The audience does not have the full chronological idea of what has happened, and they questions Mila's character and her motives. The proeretic, semantic, and symbolic code is used in our film to show our audience that Mila is mentally unwell, which plays into her killing her bullies. For example, Mila constantly takes antidepressant pills throughout the 2 days. Whenever she feels confused or feels anxious, she takes the pills. At first, the audience may think that the pills are taken because she has a mental condition and suffers from depression. However, when Mila spills her pills during the climax, Mila's bad identity emerges. This suggests that this whole time, Mila and the audience thought that the pills control only the emotions, but it also controls a pseudo-identity from controlling her. Once the pills are released, so is Mila's bad identity. We also challenge conventions by not showing Mila's London flat through an establishing shot. The audience may feel puzzled as to where Mila lives. We also don't see Mila's outside her house when she is sane. This connotes the dangers of being outside. The outside connotes freedom, open space. With too much freedom, Mila would not be able to control herself. Similarly, in the 2010 Ryan Reynolds film Buried, the main character is buried alive. Throughout the majority of the film, we only see him in one location, and we cannot see the outside. Therefore, it is unclear whether it is night or day. This creates a sense of mystery, which we want to create as well. We wanted Mila to be a mysterious character, and she has a unique personality, where she harbors 2 identities. We also do not see Mila interact with people socially, although we do see Mila as a teenager getting bullied. She is presented as lonesome and vulnerable, unable to stand up for herself, but we do not see her interact with people as she is older. Moreover, we challenge Todorov's equilibrium theory. Todorov proposes the idea that in all films and narrative, it begins with an equilibrium where everything is balanced and then appears a disequilibrium, a disruption in the narrative. And once everything is resolved, the narrative is back to balance with an equilibrium. Our film challenges this because it does not end in an equilibrium. It ends with a new challenge because Mila's identity is now released. Her pseudo-identity now controls her body once she looks directly at the camera. In our poster, we wanted to convey the split identity. On the front middle of the poster, Mila's hands grabbing the sides of her head, screaming. Behind this image are 2 images of good Mila and bad Mila. Good Mila is on Mila's right shoulder, with a blue angelic hue on top, which connotes she is good, whereas bad Mila behind Mila's left shoulder with a red hue which connotes evil. By conforming to conventions, we are also making sure that the audience view the film as belonging to the horror genre. Although we also wanted to challenge the conventions by creating a unique selling point within our film which not only attracts a niche audience but also a mass audience, because the fact that the film is a hybrid of crime and psychological targets the audience that want a horror film that contains crimes, as it has an element of a mystery waiting to be solved. We use the typical colours associated with horror films. For example, our background is a dark forest. We adjusted the background to look dark, almost black around the edges. The murder takes place in a park surrounded by trees. The background links to the murders. Similarly, in the poster for the Blair Witch Project, a picture of the forest at the bottom shows that the film is set in the forest. We used the archetypal red handwritten font. We wanted our audience to understand that our film contains blood and gore. Our font Cabanyal C is most similar to the 2017 It film font. Although our title is long and big, the blood dripping from the middle of a letter connotes blood to be featured in our film. Our layout with a primary image in center and credits below in a recognizable font shows that we stuck to the archetypal horror film poster structure. Similarly, in the Exorcist poster, the primary image is in the middle. The title is in the middle end of the page and the credits right at the bottom and a quote on top of the poster. We also use the BBC classification 15 at the bottom of our poster because we want our audience 15 and over to be aware of our film. Typically, horror film posters put the classification of the film so that the audience are aware of the age rating and the audience can get an understanding of how scary and violent the film is. In our poster, we present the shoulder angels. This is commonly used on TV or film when people cannot seem to know what choice to make and their good and bad conscience convince them to make the right choice by presenting their thoughts. The good angel encourages good choices and behavior, whereas the bad angel encourages the person to make bad choices. Similarly, the good Mila behind Mila's right shoulder and the bad Mila behind Mila's left shoulder connotes the good versus evil. It very much reflects our film. The good Mila trying to make all the bad choices, but bad Mila has an upper hand and convinces Mila to kill and get revenge. Along with the image, the tagline links with the image, everyone has a good and a bad side. Trailer, we used a stereotypical deep male-voiced narrator used in many trailers.
Two friends, two murders, one knife.
The narrator gives further context of our film. Because this was an audio trailer, we did not have a visual. We need to ensure that our emotions and the atmosphere was clearly expressed through the narrator's voice. The voice has a deep pitch, which creates an ominous atmosphere. The voice also anticipates the audience to watch our film when he says coming out October 27th, few days before Halloween. It anticipates the audience to watch a scary film and gets people in the mood to watch the film. We excessively use sound bites of screaming and breathing, which fades in and out to create an echo effect. As we are only limited to audio, we needed a way to express the tension from the film.
One knife.
Two young girls were brutally murdered.
The screaming connotes someone is in danger and in need of help. We also use static to connote interference because in our film, Mila watches the news, which is the climax of the film. We wanted to portray this in our trailer to show that the news scene holds most importance in our film and is a turning point where everything is revealed.
Breaking news coming in this morning from East London, where two young girls were brutally murdered.
The beginning of our radio trailer begins with breaking news just in from East London. This is repeated 2 more times but is distorted each time with static. Typically horror film sounds are simple. However, we layered many sounds together to create an explosive effect. At the beginning of our radio trailer it says breaking news just in. This sounds like a real breaking news report which would hold the attention of the listeners. Also, in our film, we wanted to portray verisimilitude. We wanted the film to depict reality. This false news report gives the audience a glimpse of the verisimilitude in our film. Listeners may be curious about the report, although we do not want to falsely lead the audience on, thinking this is a real news report. Therefore, this line is mentioned 2 more times, and each time it sounds distorted, as if something is glitching with the audio, which again referencing interference. The audience understand that this is not a real news report, followed by screaming.